Hello everyone. In this video, I'm going to be taking a look at the BM72DS monitor from Portkeys, and also looking at Portkeys' brand new Cinenorm operating system. For disclosure, Portkeys sent me this monitor in order to make this review. I've been using it for a few weeks now to get to know it, and I do get to keep it after the review. This video isn't being sponsored by Portkeys though, so they don't get to see the video before it's released or have any say in its production or my findings. As always, sharing in full my findings is my first priority, and I will always share with you any negatives I discover, as well as the good points. The BM72DS has been out for a while now, so if you already know about this monitor, and you're just here to find out more about Cinenorm, then please just jump ahead. I'll mark the sections out to make that easy. So for those that don't know about it, let's start by having a look at what you get in the box. Inside the fancy glittery box, there's a plastic hard case, which is always a welcome addition. Open up the case, you find the monitor itself, along with a D-tap power cable, a USB drive, and a small spanner that's used if you need to remove the attached antenna. Also in the box are a couple of plastic parts which clip to the top and bottom of the monitor, allowing an included sunshade to be fitted. We'll have a look at this in a bit more detail, but first let's talk about the build and layout of this monitor. The BM72DS houses a 7-inch 10-bit 1920 by 1080 screen with a reported brightness of 2200 nits. It's an all-metal construction and it feels solid and professional and weighs in at 456 grams. It's 179mm wide, 117mm tall and 30mm thick. On top we've got 4 function buttons, a quarter 20 mounting point with anti-swivel slots, a power LED, and then a scroll and toggle style control wheel with an exit button for navigating the menus. The right side contains a power switch, a USB-A connector and a headphone socket. The left side has an open grille for airflow. There's another anti-swivel mounting point on the bottom of the monitor, along with a connection point for cameras that can be controlled via a cable. On the back we've got an antenna which can be swiveled up and down, which is great because it makes the monitor more compact. I really like this feature. Also, if you need to remove it, there is a spanner included, so you can do that. Below that there's a 5-pin aviation port for motor control. Next down there's 2 options for powering the monitor. There's a screw-in DC power connector that can be used with a supplied D-tap cable, as well as a 2-pin LEMO connector. Both options can handle 7 to 24 volts. Next there's 2 slots for Sony MPF style batteries. Unlike other monitors I've reviewed, these don't have any locking mechanism for the batteries, they just push in and pull out. And over on the right side there's one 3G SDI out, 2 3G SDI inputs, an HDMI in and an HDMI out. As I mentioned earlier, the monitor comes with these plastic parts that clip to the top and bottom and then allow the included sunshade to be fitted. I have to say that these do not instill confidence in me, and I really doubt these would last a very long time as they are very flimsy. Clipping it in is fiddly and I can see the little hook parts soon getting bent or damaged. Once you do manage to get the sunshade together, however, it does work okay. The monitor boots up quickly, only taking around 8 seconds before it's ready to go. The screen itself produces a good quality image, although I did have to tweak the colour settings a little to get it to a point where I felt it matched the colours shown on the camera's screen. The image quality looks very similar to the LH7P I reviewed recently, however the additional backlight makes this much more usable when you're outside. The monitor can handle an input signal up to 1920 by 1080 at 60 Hz. Anything higher than that, either in terms of resolution or frame rate, and the monitor will not display an image. This applies to both the HDMI and the SDI inputs. So let's go ahead and have a look at the new Cinenorm operating system. There's a lot to cover in here, so we'll go through the main user interface first. After touching the screen, you can see there's main system options on the left and tools over on the right. Let's start by looking at the system options first. The big slider shown here on the left defaults to setting the backlight brightness, making it really easy to adjust depending on your environment. Pressing the icon below the slider allows you to also choose fan speed and speaker volume using the same slider. Selecting fan speed allows you to ramp up the fan to a point where it does become quite noisy. You certainly wouldn't want to have the fan this loud if you were recording audio either on camera or even elsewhere in a quiet room. Turning the fan to minimum though makes it very quiet. It's still audible, but I don't think it's enough to cause any problems. The monitor will automatically increase the fan speed though if it needs to. However, there are some useful features to help with that, which we'll cover off a bit later. Touching the speaker icon allows you to dial in the headphone output level in the same way. I really like that these settings are so upfront and easy to access. I'll change this back to backlight for now. The link icon takes you to a page where you can manage connections to external devices. The first option in here is Wi-Fi, and enabling that will allow you to connect to any compatible cameras that offer Wi-Fi control. One nice feature that you'll see throughout CineNorm is that Portkeys have added useful help tips under the question mark symbols that appear. For example, on this page, if I press that, it brings up a list of compatible cameras and devices listing the connection types that they use. There's 2 pages of Sony cameras, Panasonic, Canon, Red, Zcam, Blackmagic, Arri, Nikon and Tilta, so there's a lot of devices supported here. We've also got Bluetooth for Blackmagic or any other devices that use that same Bluetooth control system. There's also control for wired connections using the connector on the bottom of the monitor. And finally, there's motor control options for devices connected to the motor control port on the back. I'll come back and connect this to my FX3 a bit later in the video. Finally, on the left side is a cog icon which takes you to the main monitor settings. Notice while we're in here that I can toggle between seeing the video feed on the right of the screen, or you can make it full screen and have the menu displayed over it. First up, we've got image config. In here you can set backlight, contrast, chroma, sharpness, tint, color temperature, and RGB levels. I tweaked mine to get the image a little closer to what I'm seeing on the camera, and I left the color temperature set to manual so that I could dial in the RGB values to my liking. If you use one of the included color temperature presets, then the RGB options disappear. The panel page allows you to choose display gamuts. I left mine set to bypass. The input page lets you choose between HDMI or the 2 SDI inputs. You can also set up the monitor for various signal options. I'm shooting using Sony S-Log3, so I have the log option enabled with the settings to match my camera. Know that you can also set the range to full, legal or auto. I have mine set to full, as then it works better with the exposure tools that we'll look at soon. The output page allows you to define various output options, although interestingly this only applies to the SDI output. I did test passing the video through from SDI in to HDMI out, as well as HDMI in to SDI out, and both work fine. However, there's only options for the SDI output. These options include the ability to load the LUT within the output. You can convert a 1080p signal to 1080i. You can choose the 3G level between auto, level A or level B. Or you can enable display sync, which then disables the 2 previous options. I assume this is because it's matching the settings used on the monitor. I don't understand why some of these options aren't available for the HDMI output. It would certainly be good to be able to decide if you do or don't want to have the LUT sent via the HDMI out. The image flip page allows you to enable display flip mode, which offers the ability to flip the image horizontally, vertically, or both. The next page allows you to define what each of the function keys on top of the monitor do, as well as define another function for the menu scroll wheel. There's a lot of options in here. As well as choosing focusing or exposure tools like I have set up, there's also the option to set the function buttons to initiate camera control features or define an image config parameter. So you could set a button to set the backlight level to 5, which would then toggle between the setting you define and the setting in the main system options. You can also define various options for the control wheel on top of the monitor. Having it set to the monitor backlight is quite useful, as it means you can then adjust backlight without even touching the screen. While we're on the subject of the control wheel, let's have a quick chat about controlling the menus with it. When you press the wheel, the menus open and you can choose what to control by rolling the wheel. A box appears around each item, and then you press again to control that item, or press the exit button to back out. This works quite well, however I do find that I often accidentally rotate the wheel when I try to press it, which makes it select the wrong thing. I'll carry on using the wheel for a little while to show you how that works, but then I will revert back to using the touchscreen because I find that more intuitive. Another useful thing is that if you hold the exit button down for a few seconds, it turns touch control off on the monitor. Holding it again unlocks the screen. So carrying on with the monitor settings, next we've got System Config. In here you can set the language, change the opacity of the menus, perform a system reset, and again control fan speed. The next option is quite useful, as you can tell the monitor to set the fan speed at the lowest setting when the camera's recording. I couldn't make this work using either SDI or HDMI inputs, but it does work with my FX3 connected via Wi-Fi. The HDMI signal certainly carries information that tells the monitor if the camera's recording, as this is the way it works on other monitors I have, like for instance the Atomos Ninja. The next option is black level. I prefer having this turned on with my FX3, however it can be turned off if needed to better match your camera. The gesture zoom option works in a similar way as it would on your iPhone. You use two fingers to zoom in on the image, and then you can see at the top of the screen the magnification you're at, and then again use two fingers to zoom back out. Moving down, we've got another option here to change the output volume for the headphone connection. Next is an option called SDI Tally. I thought this would show red lines to signify recording, however I tested this with a Kinefinity Mavo Edge 8K and the monitor didn't show anything when the camera was recording, so I'm not really sure what this should be doing, but maybe it's specific to certain cameras. There's an option to change the position of the record button for when wireless camera control is enabled. You can choose between bottom left, bottom middle or bottom right of the screen. I'll leave mine in the default position, bottom left. The firmware page shows the currently installed firmware, the runtime of the monitor, and it gives you an option to initiate a firmware update from the USB drive. Finally, scrolling down to the next page, there's an option to export and import user profiles. This is great, especially if you've taken quite a lot of time to customize the monitor, and it also allows you to customize things like the way false color works with your camera, and then export that to, say, another monitor or just have a backup. So that's the main menu on the left covered, but before we go on to look at the tools over on the right side of the screen, I want to show you how basic navigation works within CineNorm. Touching the screen toggles the main menu on and off. This gets a little more complicated once we start adding in camera control, but for now we can ignore that. You can have multiple pages set up, giving you different tools on each page, with each allowing the tools to have different settings. Swiping left and right allows you to switch between each of those pages. For example, I've set up page 1 for my FX3, which has all the tools I use on my camera, and they're all set up especially for the way I use them. You can see that as I swipe left and right, each page name is shown in a bar that appears on the bottom of the screen. My next page is a full screen display showing scopes, with the video signal small on the top left side. So if I wanted to use this monitor with a different camera, I could create a page of tools set up specifically for that camera. If I swipe down from the top edge of the monitor, an overview screen is displayed that shows all of the pages I have set up and which tools have been placed in that page. I can jump to any of the pages by touching the arrow. I can also edit each page by touching the pencil icon. In here I can rename the page, save it, or shift its position, or delete it. When adding a new page, you can choose a custom page or load one that's pre-configured for exposure, focusing, or scopes. Also, any pages that you've saved previously can be reloaded. The bottom of this overview page displays the status of the various connection types, and if you press them you can jump straight to that part of the system. In the middle you can see power status, and over on the right there's signal information including the display gamut, which input is currently selected, and the current signal being received. Pressing any of these will take you over to the input settings menu. Swiping up on the screen closes the left and right menus, or the camera control menu, which we'll look at later. Next, let's have a look at the tools included with the monitor. To start, I'll create a new page and we'll add some tools to check out. I'll swipe down to bring up the overview page and then add a new custom page. Pressing the plus symbol opens up a list of 8 tool types. Let's start by looking at the exposure tools. Clicking that brings up zebras and false color with a brief description of what they do. I'll start by adding zebras. You can turn the tool on by pressing the toggle or by touching the icon that's now shown in the stack on the right. Anytime a tool is selected, you can then press the settings icon at the bottom to adjust the settings for that tool. The Zebra tool offers 3 levels of exposure measurement. You can set a high level IRE value to allow you to see any areas that might be blowing out in the image. You can set a middle area IRE value that you can set with a range to allow you to, say, monitor skin tones. And you can also set a low value so that you can use that to look at areas that might be too dark in your image, where you might be losing information. All of these can be adjusted, and you can change the color of each between the 4 main colors. You don't have to have all 3 switched on. They can all be toggled on and off if you just want to use 1 or 2 of the options. Next, I'll add false color. The false color on this monitor is a big step up from the previous Portkeys monitors I've used. You can still choose the ARRI style, which works well. There's also a new log mode, which is similar to using EL Zone in so much as it's stop based, allowing you to see exactly which parts of your image are where in a dynamic range. I'm just jumping in here while I'm doing the editing because I've just realised that when I filmed this I didn't turn the LUT off on the camera, and obviously for the log mode to work well you should really only send it a log signal. But hey ho, you get the idea. This is a really good system, and I've been using this quite a lot recently. But yeah, when you use this, only send it log. That's why it all looks so blown out at the moment. With either option, you can disable the tooltip if you prefer not to see it. If you need to, you can also go in and adjust the IRE values and the color for each segment. So this is really quite powerful in terms of adjusting it to suit your camera. For example, if I use the normal ARRI mode with my FX3, I can't get the highlights to go red when shooting in log. This is where the 3 map modes come in. With these, you can build your own false color scheme to perfectly match your camera. I'll show that here. I'll choose map 1, and now I can add blocks of color and define the IRE values that color covers. You can edit the start and end point of each color block, building your own false color scheme. So this means you can create 3 custom false color settings for each page. I'll hop over to my FX3 page and show you one that I created based on the ARRI style. But this time, as you can see, I've adjusted the IRE values slightly so that when my highlights blow, they do actually now show in red. Next, we have the waveform tools. The first option is called Waveform All. This one's great for getting a shot set up, as it puts a normal waveform, an RGB parade, and a vector scope on screen, along with the video feed shown using the top left quarter of the screen. I can choose if I want the LUT to affect the waveform or not, which is something I've missed since it was removed from the smaller monitors. If you want even more scopes on screen, you can select a second option that adds histogram, RGB histogram, and an 8-channel audio meter in a more compact layout and actually makes the video signal a little bigger. Next, we have the Luma waveform. With this, you can change opacity, decide if you want the LUT included, and go to a full screen mode if you want to. You also have the option to position the smaller waveform in 8 positions on the screen. I'm really enjoying the more graphical approach here over the previous versions of the operating system which just used text. We also have RGB waveform, vector scope, and Luma histogram. These all have the same options as the Luma waveform tool, with opacity, load LUT, full screen, and position. The one here that differs slightly is the RGB histogram. With that, you can also choose to separate the color channels as well as having them overlaid. The last tool in the waveform section is the audio meter. This can be set to either 2 or 8 channels. The opacity can be changed, and there's the option to apply a left and right swap if you're only using 2 channels. You can also change the position. If using 2 channels, these can be at the top, sides, or bottom, or if you're using 8 channels, they display all at the top, 4 top, 4 bottom, or all 8 at the bottom. So now that we've added some tools to this page, it's worth noting that there are options for adjusting the arrangement of the tools. By pressing the small arrow beside the name of that tool, you can either delete it, move it up or down, or swap it for a new tool. There's also an interesting option in here that works if you have camera control connected. What you can do is select any tool that you would like to automatically open when you're recording and add the little record symbol to it. I'll add it to the waveform monitor and the audio meters. Now with camera control connected to my FX3 and the tools turned off, when I start recording they will appear, and when I stop recording they will close again. What would be amazing is if you could also do the reverse to this and add a tag that removes tools when you start recording so that they automatically get out of the way. Maybe that might be one for a future update. So let's create another page which we'll use to look at the monitoring tools available. The first option in here is input. This one shows you which input is currently active and allows you to switch between the different inputs. I thought it'd be good to show these in real time because it doesn't change instantly and there is a bit of a delay when switching between the two. The next two are image overlay and image capture. These work together and you need to have the USB drive attached to the monitor to use these. You start by pressing the image capture, which stores the current frame to the USB drive. You can then use the image overlay tool to display that image over the live video feed, allowing you to easily adjust the camera to match a previously set up shot. While you're doing this, you can adjust the opacity of the image overlay if it makes it easier to match. Next, let's look at guides. This is a great example of why having the image get smaller when you're adjusting the settings is nice, as you can clearly see what your changes are doing. Here we have multiple common aspect ratio guides, but if you need one that isn't listed, you can select user and dial in something custom by setting the horizontal and vertical percentage. Switching on mark blocks out the areas outside the selected frame. However, you can adjust the opacity of this between 4 different levels. I quite like the middle option as it stops the edges distracting me, but I can still see if there's something out of the frame that I need to be aware of. You can also change the guide color between white, red, green or blue. Next we have grids. In here you can choose between 1 and 9 regions. And also select the color. You can also add a crosshair, which can be adjusted with an offset or be changed to another color. We've also got a rectangle crop tool that you can use to select an area to crop into. This can be moved around by touching the screen and its size and shape can be adjusted. There's also a check field tool where you can view the image in grayscale or only view it in red, green or blue. Next there's the timecode tool. This has 8 position options and the color can be changed. The timecode works via HDMI as well as SDI, even if the camera control isn't enabled. We've also got anamorphic desqueeze with multiple options, as well as the ability to dial in a custom setting. At the bottom there's an option to punch into the full height of the image and then choose a position for that from left to right. And lastly, in the monitoring tools, there's an option to turn off the screen. Once the screen's off, you can press any of the physical buttons to switch it back on again. Okay, we've still got a ton of tools to look at, so let's create another page. This time we're going to start by looking at the color tools. In here we've got the 3D LUT tool. You can choose from a selection of LUTs that have previously been stored on the monitor, or you can search a USB drive if you want to load a new LUT. Let's do that first. If I click on USB scanning, we can see the 3D LUT folder on the USB drive. From there I'm going to pick drive C, and we can see the LUTs that are currently on that drive. I'm going to go into the 709 Cubes folder and choose the S-Log3 Cine to S709 LUT. You can see a progress bar as the LUT is being imported, And once it's completed, you press the X to close the import page. The image looks oversaturated now as I'm still sending a LUT out from the camera. I'll start by switching that off. Now when I go back into the LUT tool, I can see the LUT that we've just added. Also in the color section, there's an HDR HLG tool, and this one doesn't come with any options. In the focus tools, we just have peaking. With this, you can choose between a full color image with color peaking, a grayscale image with color peaking, or full color with edge enhancement. The peaking tool has a lot of options to allow you to really dial it into your preference. You can choose a grayscale level. You can change the peaking threshold. You can change the brightness and contrast of the image, the line thickness, and the peaking color. You can also add a peaking frame, allowing you to limit peaking to a specific area of the frame. Next, there's 3 tools for handling dual screen use. That's where the DS comes from in the name. I'll add those now. We've got PBP, HV crop, and PIP. Let's start with PBP, or picture beside picture. I've got 2 cameras feeding the monitor at the moment, one via HDMI and one via the SDI input. So when I switch on PBP, you can see both video inputs side by side. You can choose which signal you want to hear the audio from, and then the rest of the options allow you to dial in each picture. So I can choose set A, rotate it 90 degrees if I want to, set the mirroring to either horizontal, vertical, or both, and then choose which input I want to apply to set A. Likewise, if I choose set B, I can set that to SDI and then make similar choices for that signal. The HV crop tool takes the selected input signal and shows a preview of how that signal would look if it was cropped for a 9:16 vertical video format. You have the options to mirror the source image, although this isn't reflected in the cropped version. You can also change the input signal or the start point of the vertical crop, meaning that you can make the vertical crop frame work if your subject isn't in the middle of the frame. Finally, the PIP, or picture-in-picture tool, displays one input full screen and the other shown as a small picture-in-picture overlay. You can choose which signal goes to which position and then set the mirroring options for each one. You can also change which of the 4 corners you want to place the picture-in-picture image in. We're still not done yet. Let's add one more page and add the image config controls. In here we've got contrast, chroma, sharpness, tint, and backlight. With these added to the tool menu, what you can do is make adjustments to each one and then enable them individually or together to temporarily adjust the image. The last set of tools we have are for camera control, but first we need to connect the camera. So let's go ahead and connect to my FX3 via Wi-Fi. The BM72DS has the same camera control system that I demonstrated in my MovNorm review. So if you've watched that video or you've been using MovNorm, then you'll already know what's on offer here. So back on the main menu, I'm going to press the link icon and then choose Wi-Fi and switch it on. Next, I need to prepare the FX3. At the time of making this video, I'm on firmware version 6. In this version, you need to connect using the remote shoot function. To do this, go into the menu, go down to network, then go across to connect/remote shoot. From there, go across again and select remote shoot function. Then you go down and select Wi-Fi direct info, and then finally choose exit and go to next. From here, I just have to wait and then the monitor should connect to the camera. If you're connecting for the first time, you may have to enter the password that's displayed on the camera. With the camera connected, you can see the way the camera information is displayed on the top and bottom of the monitor. It is worth noting that these bars do overlay the image, so you need to be aware of that and not leave them up all the time when you're filming. I'd love to see Portkeys add an option where the video being displayed is reduced in size so that the camera information can be displayed constantly without affecting the view of the image. I normally like to set the menu opacity so that I can see through these bars, which helps a little. However, for this video, I'll leave that off to make it easier for you to see the information. To remove them, you simply swipe up on the screen and they will disappear. To bring them back, you touch the screen again. It's a bit annoying that they always open with the main menu, as quite often you don't need that, or you just want the main menu on its own. I think there could be a better way of handling that. Anyway, just tapping on the screen again closes the main menu, leaving you just with the camera control menu. We can see starting top left the current white balance setting, the color temperature if using Kelvin, the exposure value, and the currently selected filming mode. Next to that, we've got the remaining record time on both of the cards in the camera. Top right, you can see the Wi-Fi signal strength along with two battery icons. The first is showing the battery state for the camera and the second is for the monitor. Pressing the area opens an information panel giving you more detail about what's connected. It shows the current video signal and image settings. It also shows Bluetooth and Wi-Fi status and additional power information. You can toggle the Wi-Fi and Bluetooth on and off using the buttons here, or press the small arrows to jump to the relevant sections in the main menu or display more information. Along the bottom we've got a record button, an autofocus start button, iris, the shutter setting, the ISO setting, and then focus and zoom controls. Most of these items not only display camera settings, but they also allow you to adjust the setting. The options available vary from camera to camera, but I'll go through them now and show you what I can control on my FX3. White balance allows you to go in and choose between any of the white balance modes on the camera. For example, you can see that I'm currently using custom white balance 1. I can switch that to Kelvin and the camera updates accordingly. Notice that the CT or color temperature is now displaying 4200, so we can press that and dial in the required color temperature. With most of these features, you'll see they've got two ways of adjusting the setting. You can either use the slider, which works really well if you want to make fast changes, or if you want to make smaller changes, you can go over and use the two arrows on the right hand side to make small increments to go up and down. I'll change that back to my custom white balance 1. Next along is the EV or exposure value setting. This only functions when the camera is in an auto exposure mode, so to demonstrate that I'm going to change my camera to be in auto iris by holding down the iris button. So now I can go in and adjust the exposure value directly on the monitor. I'll switch auto iris back off again for now. Next along we've got the shooting modes. Here you can select from the various shooting modes in the camera and you can see the normal filming mode is currently selected. I don't generally use most of the other options, however I can switch between normal and S&Q mode, which can be really useful. I'll change that back to normal filming mode for now. Moving to the bottom we have the record button. When this is pressed, the camera starts recording and the clip runtime is displayed. Notice also that the fan has now gone really quiet as soon as I've started recording. I really like that feature. The next icon initiates an autofocus. So if I switch the camera to manual focus and press the button, you'll see that the camera will autofocus even though it's in manual focus mode. Moving along, we've got the iris control, which we can adjust with the slider or the buttons. You'll notice one thing to be aware of is that the camera doesn't actually change until the slider is released, which makes it a bit tricky to adjust exposure this way. The better option here is to use the arrows. Next is the shutter speed, which is currently not working as I have firmware version 6 on my FX3 and the monitor doesn't support the shutter angle mode that I'm currently using. If I change back to shutter speed mode, you'll see that the information is being displayed correctly and I can adjust the shutter speed from the monitor. Next along we've got ISO. I'm currently using Cine EI and while the correct base ISOs are displayed, the monitor is currently not able to change those base ISO levels on the camera. I'll change to flexible ISO on the camera and as you can see it now works as expected and I can adjust the ISO level using the monitor. I will switch back to Cine EI to continue though. Next let's have a look at the focus controls. You can see down the right hand side of the monitor we've got three options. At the top is the current focus mode, in the middle is the focus area, and at the bottom is the touch focus options. If I press where it says MF, then I should be able to choose between manual focus and autofocus. However, I've noticed that in this version that doesn't always seem to work properly. If I start in the AFC mode, it seems to work correctly, but not always the other way around. In the manual focus mode, arrows appear at the bottom of the screen that allow you to manually adjust focus. I find with my Sony G Master lenses that this isn't particularly usable. You can do fast changes, but if you try to do a slow focus pull, you'll have a long wait because it's incredibly slow. Next is the focus area setting. I've got my FX3 set up with only 3 active focus areas. I have wide, zone, and expandable spot. If you've got all of them turned on your camera, then they will all appear here. Switching between the focus areas is easy on the monitor, and likewise if you use the camera to switch between them, then you can see the currently selected focus area changing on the monitor. Next we've got the touch focus controls. Now it's worth noting that in order for this to work well, you do need to be using a small focus area, which is why I'm currently using expandable spot. The first icon is signifying that touch focus is currently selected. So if I touch the top of the light tube in the background here, then you'll notice that the focus area is moved on the camera and the camera focuses on that area. Likewise, if I touch the middle of the color checker on the monitor, you can see the focus area move on the camera and the camera will now slowly focus on the color checker. You don't get any visual feedback on the monitor showing you the area that's been selected though, so you do need to look on the camera if you need to see that. If I press on the touch focus icon, it changes the camera to touch tracking. So if I touch in the middle of the color checker on the monitor, you can see now on the camera display that it's tracking that area. So if I move the camera, you'll see the camera will track that area and keep it in focus. It's worth noting that there's nothing on the monitor that shows you what area is being tracked, so you do have to keep an eye on the camera's display if you want to see that information. While the camera is in touch tracking mode, a small cross will be shown on the tracking icon on the monitor, showing that you can touch it again to cancel tracking. This is important because if you're using touch focus or touch tracking, the monitor is using the touch screen to focus, so it will no longer allow you to access the menu controls. In order to call up the main menu or toggle the camera settings, you need to turn off the touch tracking feature by pressing that icon again. Once you've done that, you'll have the ability to toggle the camera settings or touch the screen to bring up the main menu. If you've got a lens that has a motor-driven zoom, then you can also control that using this monitor. I don't have a lens like that, so I can't test it here. While we have the camera control running now, let's go back and check out the additional options we have, and let's start with the function button options. We have a few options for the menu wheel. If I add iris control to that, you'll see a limitation with doing that, because if any of the menus are open, the wheel defaults to navigating those. If I close those, however, you can see that the wheel is controlling the iris, although you can't see the iris setting on the monitor because the menu has to be closed. So I don't really see the advantage of doing that. Another not fully working part is the ability to add camera control options to a function button. If I try to do this, it says to go to the camera control page and hold a function to add it, but that doesn't seem to do anything, so I'm not sure if this is a feature that hasn't been implemented yet or I'm just misunderstanding it. The other thing I wanted to try was adding camera control to the tool menu. I'll scroll down on this one and add that now. So first of all, I have to find a control option. Let's try iris. I'll choose select, and that has now been added to the tools. The way this works is it returns the camera to whatever the specified setting was. So if I change my iris, I can then press this tool and the iris will return to my chosen setting. That's actually pretty cool. The only problem is with my FX3, that seems to be the only setting that I can choose. All the others say I can't use this setting. Maybe with other cameras you'll be able to recall more of those settings. So let me sum up by giving you some of my final thoughts. After using the BM7 for a few weeks, I have to say that I've really been enjoying it. The 2200 nit screen makes it a pleasure to use outside, and nice little touches like having the fan go quiet when you start recording and having the ability to choose if you want the LUT included in the scopes are great to have. I think the Cinenorm OS is a huge step forward from the original Portkeys operating system. It's also quite a big step up over the new Movnorm OS on the smaller monitors. The option for creating custom layout pages with so many monitoring tools and control choices gives users multiple ways to use this monitor. And one more thing that I've really got to mention is the way Portkeys have made the false color tools work. I've made so many videos where I've said it would be lovely to be able to have some customization options with the false color tool, and the way you can go in and adjust those now and edit them right down to the IREs and the color values is just fantastic. At the time of making this video, the BM72DS is around $900 in the US and around £1,000 here in the UK. So it's more than double the cost of something like the LH7P. When it comes to 2000 nit 7-inch monitors with SDI support and camera control options, this does offer very good value against other well-known brands. In terms of cons, there's a few things that could make the BM72DS better for me. Firstly, having camera control is cool, but dealing with all those menus overlaying the image and getting in the way makes me want to turn camera control off. With the camera control menus open, as well as the system menus, your view of the image becomes very blinkered. It's also annoying that when you turn camera control off, you lose some of the nice features, like having the fan speed spool down when you record, the recording lines on screen, and the cool option where you can make tools automatically appear when you record. HDMI does carry a signal telling the monitor that camera recording is happening, so it would be nice to see these features available without having to use a Wi-Fi connection to the camera. Also, why is there only one HDMI in port? I get that SDI in is the more pro standard, but as a monitor that offers dual screen options, it would be nice to have the option to see two HDMI inputs as well. All in all though, I've really enjoyed using the BM72DS recently, and this will definitely be my go-to choice, as I'll miss a lot of these options going back to one of my smaller monitors. So if you've made it this far, then well done. I can't believe how much time it's taken to cover all these features. I hope it was useful though, and if you have any questions then please leave a comment. I do try to reply to every question and will gladly help if I can. So thanks loads for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.